Morning. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning. How are you?
Outstanding. Great to have you on. Looking forward to the conversation, and I certainly want to get into your relationship with your dad in just a moment. But first, I want to ask you about Samford University Athletic Department. My goodness, man, what a year that you guys have had. I know you're extremely proud of what your teams have accomplished and the great roster of coaches that you have, and really doing some terrific things. As James likes to say, the red, white, and blue has been representing, that's for sure.
We've had a fun year, and Casey Dunn, our baseball coach, did a tremendous job. We thought we were a run away from beating Mississippi State, who just made the College World Series, and then football has done well. We got to get this basketball thing going a little bit. We were on the right track, and then had some really tough injuries this year, and which kind of held us back. But I tell you, it's a wonderful school, it's a wonderful place, and it's my alma mater, so I'm having a lot of fun being back.
Yeah, I know basketball is close to your heart. I have no doubt you'll get it straightened out. But to be recognized as the top overall athletic department in the SoCon, that's something that I know you don't take all the credit for it. But as an AD, that's got to be the goal going into every school year.
Well, it is. We want to be the preeminent program, and there's a lot that goes into that, and it's all about people, and we've got wonderful people. When it starts with our coaches who really get it and understand it, and you know, I joke with them all the time that coaches win games and administrations win championships, but we've got great people, and that's where it all starts.
Martin Newton with us, our guest on the Bud Light Hotline here on the Gary Harris Show. C.M. Newton, your dad, I'm a long-time admirer, but I remember in the 70s watching the C.M. Newton show on television. You made an appearance or two on there doing some ball drills, I remember. But, getting to know him when he moved back to Tuscaloosa in retirement, then having the opportunity to sit down with him for an in-depth conversation a couple of years ago. I mean, obviously the basketball history is just phenomenal in regards to him, but the thing that I was struck by is what everybody is struck by that met him and got a chance to be with him was just he was a gentleman, and he treated everybody. And I would watch it when he would come to the games at Coleman Coliseum in the post-game media room afterwards. It didn't matter if it was John Calipari or Avery Johnson or whatever coach, or it was just somebody who came up to say hello. He seemed to treat everybody the same way. And his genuine ability to connect with people, I guess, is what I'll remember about him most. And I guess as his son, you really saw that up close.
And it's been so cool to hear all the neat stories and read the different posts that people have said about Dad and the impact that he had on their lives. And the interesting thing for me is it's not just how he acted in the public eye or when he was in the public eye. He was even more so at home. I mean, he was just a good person, and the way he loved us and lived his life and treated us was just. He was the gold standard for which we measured everything, and so it's neat to hear all those neat things that are being said. But I can tell you that again that it was probably he was even better at home, and that to me is the true testament of somebody.
Right.
And I think he did a lot of great things in his career, a lot of things that he's very proud of. But I can tell you his greatest accomplishment he was a great husband and he was a great father, and I was blessed to be his son.
We replayed the interview here on the radio last week and on television that I did with him a couple of years ago. I had Wendell Hudson on last week, so we went all through the incredible job he did of integrating athletics at the University of Alabama with Wendell Hudson, and that's well documented. The run he had here in the 70s. I tell people all the time, Martin, Alabama's won 7 SEC regular season championships in the history of the program. He won 3 in a row, 74, 75, 76. And as you know, that 76 team, could have beaten anybody. Could have beaten Indiana, and just didn't, but could have. And from a basketball standpoint, I think Alabama fans are aware of his accomplishments. But I think what's ironic to me is from a standpoint of what all he meant to the game of basketball, both here and internationally, I think in some ways he might be more appreciated abroad or in other parts of the country because here you see him as C.M. Newton, former Alabama basketball coach, but around the world he really is viewed as an iconic figure in the game of basketball. And I mean that. I'd like for you to expand on that.
Well, it's interesting. I'd been working with a friend of mine, Alex Evans, about this SEC story they did on Courage Matters, and we've been working on that for about 8 years, and Alex was a friend of mine back in my Nike days, and as we got talking about my dad's life and just the things he's done, and Alex kept saying, man, we got to do a film on this thing. And so we kept doing it and putting it together, and then it wasn't until the film actually came out and I watched it and I started thinking about, holy cow, my dad was he really was involved in a lot more than just coaching. And then I started realizing, a lot of what he is known for is, or you talk about, is integrating, Transylvania University, and then the University of Alabama with Wendell Hudson, and then at Kentucky with Tubby Smith being the first African-American coach. But really what my dad wanted to be known for was a contributor, because that's what he did. He went into the Naismith Hall of Fame as a contributor, which means he was just involved in so many facets of basketball, whether it was collegiate basketball or internet, putting the original dream team together. And he'll tell you that he was lucky, that he was always at the right place at the right time. And I'll tell you, no, he was an innovator and a pioneer and somebody that just really cared. And at the end of the day, I think that's what his legacy is going to be all about, is just how much he contributed and cared, not only about people, but the game itself.
No doubt about it. You mentioned the 1992 Dream Team. How much impact, and not only on the game of basketball, but on popular culture, did that team have? It's the greatest basketball team ever assembled. End of story. No other team is even close. And how proud do you think he was of playing a big part in that?
Well, once he got his toe in the Olympic thing with Coach Knight and the '84 Olympics, and really, so he got into international basketball. And Dad, when I talk about being a pioneer and an innovator, he started seeing early on the way the international game was going and the changes that were going in the international game. And if you'll remember, he was the chair of the rules committee that put in the 3-point line and the shot clock, and a lot of that came from, again, watching the international game. But he realized that the professional basketball internationally, that's what our college kids were playing against, was professionals. And so to have his footprint and to have his fingerprints, I should say, on putting together that original dream team, I think was something that if you probably ask him, name one, your top 3 accomplishments, I think that would be in his top 3 from a professional standpoint, because it really did. It changed the way basketball was viewed, not just in this country, but internationally. And it took our NBA game around the world and exposed them and made them some of the icons that they are today worldwide. And so I think he took a lot of pride in that. And again, he will, knowing Dad and knowing how he was, he deflected all the credit and never boasted or bragged about it. But he was in the middle of that, and he helped orchestrate that entire original dream team.
Martin, one of his great gifts, I think, and you mentioned going into the Basketball Hall of Fame as a contributor. I always thought, when I look back at his career, particularly after he passed, and I was just reading notes, is that, first of all, he seemed like he never failed at anything, but he always seemed to know when it was time. I mean, you look at the Alabama situation. I asked him 2 years ago. He said, it was just time, Gary. It was time to go. And he had a short stint in the conference office. He did great things with Vanderbilt. He went home to Kentucky, and we know what he did there. But he always seemed to. And that's, I guess, why he was able to be involved in so many different things. He never overstayed his welcome, it seemed like, anywhere to me, Martin. He knew when it was time to move on and do something else.
Well, I'd love to give him credit for that, but I'm going to give that credit to my mom, who passed away in 2000. And she had a saying, and Mom was only about 5'2". He was 6'3", but I'm going to tell you what, she ran the show. There's no doubt about that. And so, but she had a saying that says you have to leave while you're still in love. And I think Dad always did that at every step of his career. He loved Alabama, and he loved his time at Alabama. But I think he also realized that, it was time to go, and it's time for them to turn it over to somebody else. And at that time, it happened to be Wimp, who went on and took it to the next level in some ways. And then the same thing at Vanderbilt. He just felt like, we're still in love, but it's time to go back to my alma mater and make a difference. And I do think he was a little bit Forrest Gumpish in that he was in the right place at the right time. But a lot of those were things that he created because he knew when to let go and when to move on.
Another thing he told me 2 years ago that it struck me, because he played for Coach Rupp and worked for him. He worked for Coach Bryant, two of the greatest icons in the history of coaching. He said Rick Pitino was the greatest coach he was ever around. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all, because what Rick did at that time, and you got to remember now, Kentucky basketball was at the lowest point it had ever been. And the expectations in Kentucky and around their basketball program are similar to the expectations in Alabama around their football program. Right. And what could have happened in that situation is if he doesn't bring Rick in, that they kind of bring in a couple of different coaches and they're good, but they flounder and they're not as great. And then all of a sudden he brings Rick in, and man, he brought it back quick, and he brought it back with excitement, and with I mean it built it back immediately. Where it's kind of like if you'd have brought Nick Saban in right after Bear Bryant, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Or one removed. That those two guys are such, their personalities and their ability to build programs and sustain programs, and so. And it was a lot of fun then too. That's when Dad got to get off the sideline and enjoy being a part of programs without having the stress of every day to day, whether you're in practice and winning and losing. So it was a lot of fun. And Rick, he will still credit for Rick for doing an incredible job of bringing Kentucky basketball quicker than anybody else could have.
One thing I did not know, Martin, until I was going through your Twitter feed, researching for the interview with you, and I know that Coach Newton was very, very close with his brother. You call him Uncle Newt. I didn't realize that they passed within 4 days of each other. I guess when you're that close and you're that good of friends as well as brothers, when it was time for them to go, they went together, sort of.
You know, it was amazing, and it's been tough on the family, obviously, losing two icons like that. Uncle Newt was his older brother, and they were very close. It's funny, when we did the Courage Matters, we were sitting around. They had a guy from New York was being the voice of my dad because Dad wasn't strong enough at the time. And I called Alex. I said, "Hey, man, that ain't going to work. That guy's from New York. He doesn't sound anything like my dad." And he said, "Well, what do you recommend?" And it was my wife who said, "What about Uncle Newt?" And so he was actually the voice of my dad during the Courage Matters. And the Sunday before my dad died on Monday, he received a phone call from Uncle Newt. Now, Dad couldn't respond or talk back, but he heard every word that Uncle Newt said. And then I think Uncle Newt after that just kind of said, "You know what? It's time for me to go as well. I've taken care of my baby brother, and it's time for me to move on." So it was as bittersweet as it is. I know where they both are. They're in a great place. They've reunited with their with my mom and with Aunt Ruth, and they're having a great time.
Gosh, what a story, Martin. One of our listeners, Steve, is on the line and wants to talk to you for a moment. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's go to the Bud Light Hotline and welcome in Steve. Steve, you're on with Martin Newton. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, Martin, how are you?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. I don't have any reason to believe that you'd remember this. I'm Steve Wells. We were in high school. We were in Miss Heath's typing class.
I do remember.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you and I sat next together.
Yeah.
And you were just one of the finest folks I'd ever been around, even in high school. And to this day, I give you credit for me graduating because typing was not my forte. And you would look over and you would help me, and then sometimes you would ask me ask me about this, but you got me through typing class.
Well, Steve, that's the first time anybody's ever given me credit for getting anybody through school, because that may be the only A I ever made in school was in typing.
Well, that's why I graduated. You got an A, I got a C. And I'll take that all day long.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Steve.
I just that was you were just such a good you're just such good people. You were so nice. I was a year your junior, and you graduated a year ahead of me, and I got through typing because of you, because you were a lot of fun to be around. You were just so cool. And I got it out of the way.
Thank you so much, Steve.
To my senior year and graduate, and you were such a great guy.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate you, buddy. Good luck to you. Hope to see you at some point.
Yeah, that would be. And I'm so sorry about your dad, but he is loved in the Lord. I promise you that.
Absolutely.
Well,
thank you so much, Steve. We appreciate hearing from you. That's a great story. So what he's telling us, Martin, unlike most journalists like myself, you type with four fingers. You're not a two-finger pecker outer like I am. You bang out the keyboard pretty well, huh?
Oh yeah, seriously, maybe in the only A I ever made in high school or college. So I'm a pretty good typist. That's about the only thing. That's maybe my claim to fame. I need to put that on my resume now, that I can type.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, and of course, you mentioned your mom, Evelyn, who passed away prior to CM, and CM was remarried to his wife, Nancy. When he retired, they could have lived anywhere. Could have lived anywhere they wanted to, and came back to Tuscaloosa. What do you think that said? Of course, I know you and your family are in Birmingham, but what do you think that says about this area and his love for Tuscaloosa and the people in West Alabama, that he came back here to retire?
Well, I just think he had such a good love affair with the university. I mean, you think about it, he went from Little Transylvania University to the University of Alabama and had some wonderful times. It's where I grew up. It's where my sisters grew up, and it was home. And so I think when he had the opportunity to come back and he was looking at, I think initially he talked about Fort Lauderdale, maybe moving back there. That's where he grew up. But I just think that, especially Anthony Grant and Avery and Mal Moore, those people were so good to him and made him feel so welcomed and important. And, you can say what you want, but the older we get, it's good to still be remembered and to feel important, and they made him feel important.
Absolutely.
So I think I had a lot of great friendships there, and so I just think it made sense for him to move back to Tuscaloosa. I loved it because, now I was only 45 minutes to an hour away from him, so it just says a lot about the university in Tuscaloosa and the impact that place had on him during his career and his life.
Well, Martin, I appreciate the time. I don't know how many people that this can be said about, but in my dealings here in Tuscaloosa as a sportscaster, I've never heard anyone say a negative word about Sam Newton. And I wish I could probably say the same about myself, but I'm not sure I can, or many people can. But that was the case with him. And we appreciate your time and for sharing some of these memories with us. And also keep up the great work there at Samford.
Well, we appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me on and getting to talk about my hero. I appreciate it.